Also, I'd like to present to Curtis on behalf of the Park Service, we cannot offer much to our living history groups. They give so much of their time and they donate so much.
For the demonstration, and myself and Acting Sergeant Major Miller, we're all volunteers. In addition to the 3 Tennessee units, the 1st, the 7th, and the 14th, which were actually the 3 Tennessee regiments that fought here at Gettysburg. Also in our battalion, we have a company from the 13th Virginia. And basically, as Tom said, my job is to sort of explain to you what's going on with linear tactics, because basically most people look at this and they say, why in God's name are people fighting shoulder to shoulder, elbow to elbow, going across open fields in the face of the firepower they had to face? Well, one of the things that's important to understand is the Civil War is a period of great transition in military technology. In fact, about the 25, 30 years prior to the war, there had been some significant changes in how and why certain types of tactics were used. Now, prior to the Civil War, what's the major war most of these people that fight in the Civil War served in? They fought in the Mexican War. Virtually every senior officer on this field had served in Mexico. A lot of the volunteer officers, in fact, had served as enlisted men in the Mexican War, at least among the senior leadership. And the reason I bring that up is they are fighting, even in, this is 1846, 1847, they are fighting with a smoothbore musket. You hold your weapon up. This is an example of it. This is a model 1842, 69 caliber smoothbore musket. It's basically kind of like a long-barreled shotgun. Its controllable range of accurate fire is only about 100 to 150 yards, even in mass volley fire. So, what you were trying to do is you have a very short killing range before you get rifles. Now, another change that this weapon made is, if you will note, again, hold up so they can see the lock. That's the firing mechanism. And the firing mechanism on this weapon is a percussion cap. Now, a percussion cap is a great innovation. Most people don't realize this. Very many people are very acquainted with rifle technology changing, but the percussion cap is a small brass or copper cap that is filled with fulminate of mercury. What's your primary form of ignition prior to the invention of percussion caps? Flintlock ignition. Flintlock ignition, while an improvement on its predecessors, is still a notoriously unreliable system, particularly for military-type activities. Now, one of the great military institutions of the 19th century, the British Army, which never did anything in a hurry, studied flint ignition versus percussion ignition over a period of 12 years, both in Britain and in India, and after test firing literally hundreds of thousands of rounds, came to the conclusion that in the average weather conditions, whether you're in India or you're in Britain, of 1,000 fires with a flintlock musket, you're going to have just over 400 misfires. With percussion ignition, you're going to have slightly less than 4 misfires per 1,000. So during the Civil War, you know, in addition to the fact that you've gone from the smoothbore musket to a rifled musket, where your range has gone from about 100 to 150 yards to 300 to 400 yards of killing range, you also have about 40% more lead flying downrange. The problem is, all of these things are relatively new developments. This was the first U.S. military long arm, well, actually this and the 1841 rifle, that had percussion ignition. Now, one of the things about the changeover on rifles, and unfortunately I forgot to bring a mini ball out with me. A mini ball is a great invention too, because, you know, you say, well, we fought the American Revolution with rifles and all these other things. No, by and large, we fought with muskets, because because old-style rifling, the rifles, to get it to work, to get the ball to actually engage with the lands and the grooves in a rifle, you either wrapped it with an oiled patch or an oiled cloth and forced it down into the grooves. The mini ball, which is a French invention from the 1840s, is most of you have probably seen it. It's a cylindro-conical shaped bullet that's cupped out in the back. That means it's slightly smaller. It's made slightly smaller in the bore of the weapon, and when that lead ball is forced down on top of the powder, the explosion goes into that hollow base and blows the walls out of that lead round into the rifling so it engages. So now you've got twist. So basically, the big change here is you have rifled musket fire, which gives you controlled fire out to about 300 to 400 yards range. You also have 40% more lead going down range because of percussion ignition. The problem is they hadn't had time to really start alternating and changing the tactics. Rifles do not become standard issue in the United States Army until 1855, just 6 years before the war starts. And these are both rifles and rifle muskets, a rifle musket being a somewhat longer version.